Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this great Recreation Caucus briefing. And I would like to pass it over to Senator Heinrich, who doesn't need much introduction if you're on this from the recreation world, a huge champion of ours, co-chair of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus. He's going to lead us off in what should be a really exciting panel. Thank you again for being here, and we look forward to hearing your questions at the end. So I'll pass it around to Senator Heinrich.
Great. Thank you, Jess. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you to all the members of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus and staff for joining today's congressional briefing hosted by the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. And I really want to say a special thanks to Jess Turner for her leadership and work to put this event together. I'd also like to acknowledge my Republican co-chair of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus, which is Senator Jim Risch of Idaho. And I want to take a moment to thank all of you for the work that you do to grow our nation's outdoor recreation economy. While I'm sure many of us would really rather be outside with real mountains or real tents behind us rather than our backgrounds, and rather than being in front of our computers, this really is a critical time, I think, for us to think strategically about the future of the outdoor recreation industry and the places that we all love. Outdoor recreation can help us solve health disparities, employ millions of American workers, connect Americans to their heritage, and grow local economies. We've also learned over the last couple of years that outdoor recreation is an issue where Republicans and Democrats have been able to come together and achieve major victories. So no matter how the election turns out in a couple of weeks, we need the next Congress and the next administration to have a modern vision for public land management that is rooted in conservation, in recreation, and in solving the climate crisis. Americans value our public lands for what they provide us in terms of outdoor recreation, in terms of environmental justice, climate solutions, preservation of biodiversity and wildlife, clean water, and rural economic development. But those are not always the public benefits that our federal land management agencies have prioritized. The mission of public land management should be focused on serving the American public and safeguarding the values that deliver these public benefits. It's my belief that we need to reorient the Department of the Interior and the U.S. Forest Service towards delivering more of those forward-thinking objectives. And I strongly believe that we need to create a national outdoor recreation plan. The truth is that our work to modernize the management goals for our public lands, to prioritize public access and outdoor recreation, has simply never been more critical than it is today. We have to help our economy survive and build back from these challenging times, and we have to do it within the long-term uncertainty of the pandemic. The hospitality, tourism, and outdoor recreation industries will face unique challenges in restoring consumer confidence and recovering businesses to where they were before. And I hope this discussion will provide us with a clearer picture of what we're confronting and the solutions to what we're confronting. However, I want to emphasize how optimistic I am that we can make the outdoor industry a key piece of our national recovery. My commitment to this is personal. I've spent my entire adult life working to protect our public lands. Before I ever ran for public office, I worked as an AmeriCorps volunteer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I worked as an outfitter guide, leading educational trips for kids into the backcountry all across the Southwest. And I've spent years fighting alongside local coalitions in my home state to protect treasured landscapes and to open new public access and to establish new protected designations. I've seen firsthand how all of our conservation victories have helped us grow our state's outdoor economy. As we look for the best ways to build back, we should absolutely prioritize investments in the outdoors. There's no question that we can put millions of Americans back to work, building new opportunities to get outside. The landmark Great American Outdoors Act will help us do just that by repairing infrastructure in our public lands and creating entirely new outdoor opportunities across the nation. And I hope it will also help us finally achieve the goal that every single child in this nation should be able to get to a place in the outdoors within walking distance of their front door. We have real work ahead of us to make sure that every single American, regardless of their race, their zip code, their wealth, their background, can find the same sense of belonging in our public spaces and outdoor spaces that many of us take for granted. Growing our coalition is going to be critical as we all fight for the future of our outdoor spaces and in the face of mounting threats and climate disruptions, which we're seeing right now in my home state as wildfires are burning in October. None of us want to lose our favorite fishing holes or see our favorite rivers and lakes dry up or watch snowpack disappear from our favorite ski runs. We all need to confront the reality of the climate crisis head on if we want to save these places that we love. And I hope this discussion will prepare all of us for the actions that we need to take in the weeks and months ahead to achieve even more victories for our outdoor recreation economy. And with that, I'll turn it over now to the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable's Executive Director, Jess Turner.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you so much for truly being a champion on recreation across the board. I don't think there's a recreation bill that has passed during my time working on these issues that you haven't been a huge supporter of and led the way on. So we really appreciate all that work and those remarks. Again, we're sorry that Senator Risch couldn't be here, but appreciate his ongoing support for the work of this bipartisan and bicameral outdoor caucus. And we hope to really grow this caucus, as the Senator mentioned, next year as these recreation issues become even more in the limelight for Congress and the administration. So a little bit of background on Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. We are a coalition of 33 recreation industry trade associations representing over 110,000 businesses and really the full breadth of outdoor recreation. We came together a few years ago to make the recreation pie bigger instead of fighting over its slices, and to really show what a $778 billion economy looks like that makes up 2.2% of the GDP and supports 5.2 million American jobs. So prior to the pandemic, we were actually growing faster than the economy as a whole in every single indicator. And through our collective businesses, the thousands of businesses who touch every corner of the country, we contribute more to the economy than our industries like agriculture and mining and utilities. However, and what we're here to talk about today, the industry, like many other industries, has gone through many changes in the past 6 months. In May, the Census Bureau actually ranked outdoor recreation as the second most impacted industry next to food and accommodation. Entire supply chains were disrupted. Meanwhile, local, state, and federal lands, which really serve as the backbone of our industry, were shuttered along with our retailers and service providers. According to our May survey, 88% of businesses had to lay off or furlough employees, 94% saw a significant decrease in revenue, and virtually 100% of the businesses were having trouble with distribution and supply chains. However, at the same time, customers were turning to the outdoors like never before for health, fitness, solace, and safe ways to get together with friends and family. According to the Outdoor Foundation data, usually less than 50% of Americans have a single outdoor recreation experience every year. But this past May, we saw that 81% of Americans said that they got outside, that they planned on doing it again, and that they were actually mostly first-time recreationists. So this influx in new participation really became reflective in the summer in sales data, license, passes, vehicles, equipment. Some of the members on the phone today can explain more about what we saw over the summer, which was a huge growth spurt for recreation and in many demographics that we've been looking to bring to the table. New participants were younger and more diverse, and the recreation industry is eager to really harness this energy and create lifelong outdoor enthusiasts. At the same time that participation is increasing, recreation is experiencing some challenges on the sustainability of our lands and waters, and certainly the workforce that are out there day to day helping people have great and safe experiences. So today, I hope we can cover some key topics around who the new consumer is, what they're buying and how we hope to retain them, how we're providing new ways to access the outdoors through this virus, be it virtual passes and platforms, additional education that's really needed around recreating safely and sustainably throughout this virus, and also due to the new influx of participation on our federal lands and waters. And then certainly what I'm at least thinking about, and a lot of you out west where it's starting to snow, the outlook for the winter recreation season and what's ahead for our industry in this next year. So we have an amazing panel of experts from across the industry sectors that are here to speak with us today about the challenges and opportunities that have been brought on by this pandemic, and how really with your help, we can get back to doing what the industry does best, which is building healthy communities, healthy economies, creating jobs, and contributing to America's quality of life. So with that, I will pass it on to Nicole Vassalero, Senior Vice President for the National Marine Manufacturers Association. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here before you today. Just give a little bit of a boating industry update, what we've seen in the trends in the marketplace and where we think we're going to go from here. Next slide, please. So as Jess was talking about, and I think it's really important to remember, not only is outdoor recreation something that's fun, but it's a huge driver of rural and local economies. Here you can see the marine economy alone is $373 billion in gross output, supporting over 2.3 million jobs. And the marine economy, the marine fishing and boating economy, is actually growing at a faster rate than the overall US economy. This was pre-pandemic, and based on the numbers we saw this past summer, we expect that to only continue to grow and outpace the overall growth of the US economy. Next slide, please. So it's a tale really of two vastly different situations. In the early spring, when COVID was first coming into the market, we had extreme shutdowns in economies throughout the country. We surveyed our marine CEOs, and at that time we saw 81% were saying business was declining. 61% thought that the conditions were going to get worse over the next 6 months. Unfortunately, 15% had to permanently close facilities, all the way down to the dealer network that had significant cash flow restraints and was very worried about staying open for 2 or more months without having that retail marketplace. Next slide, please. But things changed. As Jess was alluding to, folks didn't have opportunities this summer to go on trips, to do other activities with their families. And so they turned to the water as a safe, socially distant activity. And we saw a huge uptick in sales and orders. 51% of our CEOs reported that sales were on par with 2019. And nearly half of them actually said that orders were up compared to a year ago. The outlook looked a lot more promising in Q2, with 59% of business saying the conditions were stable, and nearly 40% actually saying that business was expanding. And people were hiring too, which is an important thing to keep in mind. 95% of the boats that are sold in the United States are actually made here in the United States. So this is a huge job creator in economies throughout the United States. And just this past summer, we saw that 37% of manufacturers were actively hiring, which is good news for our economic recovery. Next slide, please. Here you can see that manufacturing operations are really getting back online and on par with normal levels. Many manufacturers faced about 6 to 8 weeks of closures. Many were not considered essential business operations. And so you can see what that did in Q1. But again, good news, things are really back up and running and as normal as they were in 2019 levels. Next slide, please. And even better news, we are finding that new boat sales are expected to be up 10% year to date, almost getting us to pre-recessionary levels back in the 2008-2009 timeframe. So it's really great to see that interest has translated into new boat sales. And I'll show you in a little bit that we're also seeing some really changes in those buyers that are going out and making those boating purchases. Next slide, please. And the growth is really across all segments, some that are double-digit growth. You see a lot of first-time boat buyers that are coming together and getting into those entry-level boats like personal watercraft, pontoons, towboats, runabouts, wanting to look at all sorts of activities that they can do out on the water with friends and family, and do so, and again, in a safe and socially distant way. Next slide, please. And here you can see just a different way of looking at the data, but Google search trends were through the roof this past summer, and they actually continued through into September, which is hopeful that maybe we'll have a little bit of an extended boating season in some parts of the country. But you can see that people were actively interested in boating. They were searching it on their computers, and it was translating into actual sales. Next slide, please. Discover Boating was really pleased this summer to partner with the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation and the Take Me Fishing campaign to do a PSA called Get On Board. I hope that many of you had the chance to see it, but it was really great news in how folks were responding to the sense of take your family fishing, get on board, go outside, go boating, enjoy the summer, and do so in a health and safe way. And here you can see the results were, again, through the roof. Over 13,000 placements in public relations and social media outreach, $1.8 billion in campaign impressions, and 20 million campaign video views. So a really great response to this PSA effort. Next slide, please. And here you can see just as a comparison of FY21 and FY20, that growth is only continuing to be seen. So there's still that interest is out there. We hope that people are making their purchases, and if the summer season is winding down, they'll be back on the water next summer, and we'll be continuing that campaign with RBFF. Next slide, please. The other great news from the summer sales is that we're seeing a diversity uptick in the buyer mix. On this slide, you can see a comparison of first-time boat buyers, which we have seen increase, as well as repeat buyers, which tend to be more female, more ethnic minorities, and a younger average age, which is really promising news for the continued growth of this industry for future generations to come. Next slide, please. And boating and fishing go hand in hand. So 70% of all boat outings involve some sort of fishing. The good news, especially for state agencies, is that fishing sales, license sales were up about 14%. You saw a lot of this growth in resident licenses, which makes sense. People were staying more close to home. They were buying resident fishing licenses, getting out on the water with their kids and their family. And so the success and the growth that we've seen in the boating industry is matched by our partners in the fishing industry. And importantly, especially during some pretty significant economic hurdles in the states, we're seeing fishing license sales up, which translates into overall state revenue. Next slide, please. So while we're really pleased with this growth, and we understand that so many industry sectors haven't done as well this past summer, there are some remaining priorities to really harness that activity, harness the growth that's out there, and continue to build upon rural and local economies. We're really hopeful that Congress will take up WRDA and pass it before the end of the year, and focusing on some opportunities for small and emerging harbors that are used by the recreational community. We want to ensure safety, especially with an uptick in new boaters and passage of the Coast Guard bill. Excited to see next steps in implementing the Great American Outdoors Act and marrying that access and infrastructure needs on the boating and fishing community. And we do think that additional stimulus is needed to continue that sustained growth on outdoor recreation and for the boating industry specifically. So that's all for me, but I look forward to answering any questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And, it's been amazing to see the uptick in license sales, as you mentioned, and also knowing that more boaters mean more boat fuel sales, and all of that goes to, as hopefully folks know, conservation and water quality, water safety. So a lot of the things that we care about, getting more people outside for their health, for economies, also benefit conservation and wildlife. So thank you for that. I'm going to now pass it on to Sandy Miller, the Vice President of Outdoor Recreation at NIC. I'm excited to hear about Sandy's new data and information, especially in the virtual online pass experience for people to get outside.
Thank you, Jess, for having us today. Just a little bit about NIC. NIC connects visitors to outdoor recreation experiences through our online hunt and fish licensing and campground reservation solutions in 13 states, along with the federal Your Pass Now application Jess was talking about, built for the National Park Service, and our partnership on recreation.gov. My colleague Chris Neff and I will be discussing ways to manage outdoor recreation experiences for future generations during the pandemic and after, based on our extensive market research. This research allows us to provide a clearer picture of how our future generations want to digitally engage in the great outdoors for hunting, fishing, camping, and hiking, and how government leaders and recreation community can continue to evolve its technology offerings to meet those needs and increase engagement. Ben, next slide, and Chris.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning. I'm Chris Neff. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Research at NIC. And the research insights I'll be sharing are focused on young adults. But first, I thought it would be worthwhile to begin by defining who we're talking about. We conduct a lot of market research, and these insights came out of a national phone survey that we conducted this March and April with 18 to 40-year-olds. In this age group, they actually fall into two different generational groups, which you can see on the vertical bar chart on the left side of the screen. The millennials were born between 1981 and 1996, and they're between the ages of 24 to 39. And then we also have Generation Z, and they're between the ages of 5 and 23 years old. And this is a huge audience. We're talking 140 million people. They represent 42% of the population in the United States. And we hear a lot about how different young adults are as a generation compared to older groups such as Generation X, to which Sandy and I belong, or even the baby boomers. And this is certainly true. Here are two big insights that are shaping NIC's thinking. The first is that young adults don't understand government and its role in outdoor recreation as well as we believe or think they do or should. It's challenging for them, and they have low confidence in their actions as a result. 61% told us they don't know which agency or level of government provides a given service, like buying a park entry pass. Also, 22% have told us that they don't use the digital channel for transactions or customer service. 23% will instead make a phone call for help, and 22% will go to a government office. And noted this is in the pre-COVID era when we ask these questions. We believe this is because there's a greater trust that a human being will explain the process and validate what someone's doing and ultimately eliminate that fear of the unknown. And this is where the concept of training wheels comes from that Sandy's going to talk about in a moment. It's that notion that outdoor recreation activities that older generations find pretty commonplace, such as reserving a campsite online or knowing how to gear up for a weekend in the woods, they just aren't as well understood by young adults and actually can be quite intimidating. The more that organizations supporting outdoor recreation, like those on this call today, can explain and share and ultimately show young adults how to take advantage of unfamiliar activities, the more engaged they'll be and the greater the opportunity our industry will have to encourage lifelong habits like Jess was talking about earlier. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Can we go back? I missed the other piece. The other insight I do want to talk about is diversity. More than 1 in 5 members of Generation Z has at least one parent who was born outside the United States. This generation's diversity represents a great opportunity to reach out to audiences that are traditionally underserved in outdoor recreation, and Sandy will talk more about that in a moment. Now, if we could move on to the next slide, please. On this page, we have some additional insight into how young adults are recreating. And if you look at the activity frequency on the left-hand side, that multicolor horizontal bar chart, we see that roughly 2/3 participate in some sort of outdoor activity, either occasionally or frequently. But that still leaves 1/4 of the audience largely sitting out. In addition, we asked about the types of activities that people engage in, and you can see a sliding scale with hiking at the high end with more than half participating. And then it starts to go downward as we hit camping and fishing and hunting, which we see as an inverse relationship between how much available money and time and expertise the young adult has and the type of outdoor activities they're comfortable pursuing. Sandy?
Thanks, Chris. We found that expanding the offering of touchless services and providing the tools to allow recreationists to plan in advance has made for more positive outcomes and better experiences. As you can see, 53% of young adults want to plan ahead and arrive ready. And over 200,000 digital passes to enter national parks and US forests were purchased during the pandemic, allowing for that arrive ready experience and the avoidance of contact at the gate. Offering services such as digital passes, permits, timed entry, mobile payments are keys to continuing to serve these for future generations. Next slide, please. Chris, I'll turn it over to you. Oh, you're on mute, Chris.
Perfect. Thank you. I talked about the opportunity to build confidence. And Sandy was talking about, for example, the whole idea of arrive ready and being able to squeeze out that risk of not being able to access a public space because it's full, there is no parking. But also enabling any sort of pre-planning activity where that 53% of young adults can take advantage of the ability to book something or just check a box knowing that I've done everything possible to ensure that the time and the money that I'm going to spend recreating will actually occur because I've extracted as much uncertainty out of that process. We also see that the opportunity to continue to provide content digitally that allows young adults to prepare, to collaborate, to find a community of people who have similar interests, who could help them become smarter quickly in an activity, and ultimately to gear up. And finally, the opportunity to engage with anybody who's interested in outdoor recreation who just doesn't have the experience or the skill set, to be able to provide a safe and welcoming and nurturing community to help give them those training wheels and that confidence. Sandy?
Yeah, and as Chris was sharing, just to expand on that, what can government do? And I think that this allows government to step in and provide more useful content, as Chris was talking about, in terms of articles and videos to assist these new users, but also providing those touchless services we were talking about before for customers to be prepared and in compliance. But I think especially to revisit policies that maintain or increase participation or that resolve unintentional exclusions. And I'll give you an example of a policy that we widely use out in the recreation industry that may lead to unintentional exclusion. And that's a first come, first serve type of offering. And these are the types of rules that may often exclude younger age groups, our future generations who want to be engaged, and those that have disabilities or people who work service and traditional industry jobs. So taking a look at a lot of those policies we've had in place for years that now with the pandemic and COVID being the stimulus, but also trying to keep those younger generations engaged, are important to revisit. At the same time, all of us as a recreation industry and the private sector will want to engage young adults through technology tools, communication channels, and start to facilitate networks matching these adults or these new customers with veteran users and other new users so that that they can feel involved. What we've seen is that the research has showed that young adults are purpose-driven in how they choose to spend their time and money. And they want to feel a sense of service and connection to their community as a way to be part of the greater good. So all of this will be vital as more people continue to use nature as that safe space. Next slide, please. So just to kind of wrap us, as we discussed, digital government services are key to bringing in and keeping future generations engaged in the outdoor recreation industry and space. But it's also not all about the technology. We all have a role to play in serving these young adults, whether that be through policy changes, building networks to facilitate engagement, or providing educational materials to build confidence and know-how. We believe some of the insights we've shared today are just a piece of that puzzle, and by combining it with other key data points from all of us in the industry and your regulatory expertise, we're going to be able to deliver on what's most important, and that's enabling the future generations to arrive ready and have great outdoor experiences that leave them energized, excited, and wanting more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thanks for being such great partners, providing all of those license sales that we're trying to get out, and certainly helping with rec.gov, which is how a lot of people are accessing the outdoors right now. I'd like to turn it over to Karen Redfern, the Vice President for Brand and Marketing Communications, the RV Industry Association. Karen, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jess. Good morning, everyone. This past March, when our industry is usually kicking into full gear, and as we were actually getting ready to launch a new marketing campaign, the world and the travel industry in particular came to a screeching halt as we had stay-at-home orders across the US that were sweeping. The RV manufacturing facilities from coast to coast were shuttered for 6 weeks or more. And for an industry that is built on hitting the open road for exploration, Staying put was devastating, but as a 110-year-old industry, we are resilient and we've weathered many storms and come back stronger. Once the US economy started to reopen, consumers discovered the control, freedom, and flexibility of RV travel and camping. And RVs have been moving off our dealer lots at record pace. The increasing demand is driving production as well. The $114 billion RV industry that supports over 600,000 American workers is in significant growth mode. In fact, ITR Economics' latest projections estimate that 2020 will end with RV manufacturers shipping over 400,000 wholesale units, which could be our fourth best total for the industry. And their 2021 projections are for over 500,000 new units shipped, eclipsing the industry's greatest annual total set back in 2017. These numbers promise growth for the job markets that are connected to our industry, as well as campgrounds. With more Americans RV camping now more than ever, the national parks and forests are experiencing unprecedented RV camping demands. Unfortunately, many campgrounds were constructed more than 60 years ago, and the outdated infrastructure and limited site availability have really significantly reduced the RV camping opportunities and inventory on the highly sought federal lands. Prompted by the pandemic, Americans turned to camping to get outside and to enjoy nature. In 2020, 26% of campers were new, and 20% of campers were inspired to restart camping experiences. Consumers feel that camping ranks as one of the safest forms of travel. Camping reservations at state, federal, and private campgrounds are through the roof, and they're booked solid in many locations. This is a trend that we don't anticipate slowing down in the near future. Getting out in nature at campgrounds was an early driver of the 2020 consumer RV purchases. As many American workers continued to work remotely and as schools are reopening in virtual learning models, more Americans are extending their RV travel season beyond our traditional summers. Campgrounds equipped with Wi-Fi and electricity make working and learning from the road as convenient as being at home. Americans urgently need safe and adequate federal campgrounds. Additional campgrounds will bring in additional tourist dollars to help bolster the rural communities that will experience a much needed economic boost through all of the expanding outdoor recreation and camping. As we witness exponential growth in the number of new RVers hitting the road and enjoying the benefits that an active outdoor lifestyle provides, skilled workers are also needed at our manufacturing plants, and qualified, trained service technicians are vital to ensuring a great consumer experience well into the future. The RV Technical Institute recently launched a new self-paced online training program with 14 educational partners, now delivering that same curriculum across the country instead of in person. One of those partners is a provider of educational service to prison inmates in Texas. Soon they will administer their first course, providing hands-on training to 28 female inmates. On behalf of the RV industry and its 600,000 American workers, I'd like to thank every member of Congress who voted to pass the historic bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act. This landmark legislation will provide the most significant investment for our iconic public lands, outdoor recreation, and conservation in over nearly a century. The Great American Outdoors Act is very encouraging. It shows something those of us in the outdoor recreation have always known, that the great outdoors is a great unifier. We ask Congress to continue to capitalize on this bipartisan momentum and address the vital policy changes that are needed to bolster that $778 billion outdoor recreation economy that supports 5.2 million jobs, many of those in rural communities. Congress has an opportunity this session to pass an outdoor recreation package that includes the SOAR Act, Recreation Not Red Tape, Mapland Act, and so many more, so that all Americans can access our public lands and experience the health and well-being benefits of getting outdoors at a time when our country needs it the most. And I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Karen, and thanks for all of your work with the great Go RVing content. I know I'm seeing awesome videos and just a great way to explore the outdoors, although I know it's hard to get an RV these days. We've gotten a lot of requests, so I think that's a good thing. With that, I want to pass on to Scott, the Senior Vice President of the Motorcycle Industry Council. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for participating in the call today. As somebody who spent 18 years on the Hill and 7, working in a member office as well as committee office, and 7 years plus in 2 administrations, I really appreciate the work you all do for your members of Congress, the committees that you work for, and the agencies that you work for. So thank you for that, and thank you for participating in the call today. So I work for the Motorcycle Industry Council. We represent the 2- and 3-wheel motor vehicles for on and off-road use. But we also represent the manufacturers, dealers, and distributors of all-terrain vehicles, ATVs they're called, and recreational off-highway vehicles, which are more frequently referred to as side-by-sides. Next slide, please. Like Nicole mentioned, with the marine side, COVID initially hit our industry extremely hard. We were essentially shut down, but we worked with DHS and CISA to secure essential worker status, which meant that our member companies could go back to work, our dealers could go back to work, our manufacturers could go back to work. There's a lot of folks who are in the police, fire, emergency, first responders, and the military who use our vehicles on a daily basis. And it was critical that we be able to service those vehicles, sell new vehicles, and keep up with the needs of our first responders. So we appreciated DHS and CISA working with us to secure the essential service designation. The industry also stepped up and provided our own share of PPE donations to first responders and others. And from the great work that you all did on the Hill, they participated in the PPP program, which really helped keep our members afloat during the initial months of the pandemic. And we greatly appreciated that. As a side note, I will put in a pitch for the next round of PPE or any other COVID relief that you do. We really would like to see 501c6 entities included in that, in any of the future relief. So to our delight, during the pandemic, people realized that power sports were an excellent way that they could socially distance. And we saw huge spikes in the sales of motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-sides during the May, June, and July timeframes. We saw a 53% increase in off-road motorcycle sales, which was fantastic. And we saw, not unlike what Karen said, we saw many people rejoining the sport and others that were new to the sports. And many of our motorcycles are actually strapped to the back of the RVs that you'll see driving around that Karen's folks are putting on the road. And we love to see that. Next slide, please. So with all of the new vehicles that are out there on the trails, it's critical that we have places to ride them, right? So the Recreational Trails Program, or RTP, has been around since the 1990s, and it's part of the Transportation Reauthorization, the FAST Act that you all just extended through FY 2021. RTP follows the user pay model and is funded by recreational gas tax dollars that are paid for when we fuel up our off-road vehicles. So if you take a look at that chart on the left, you'll see the 270 million plus number. That kind of shows the large inflow of gas tax dollars that go into the Highway Trust Fund from off-road users, and then the small amount that actually comes out. So RTP is only funded right now at $84 million a year. And that's doled out on a formula basis where 50% of it is divided equally amongst all 50 states and the District of Columbia. And then 50% of it is doled out based on the gas tax contribution dollars for those localities. So it's estimated that we actually pay close to $300 million annually in gas tax dollars. And that amount is sure to be going up with all the new vehicles that we see out there on the trails today that were sold over the last 6 months or so. So we're looking to raise the authorized amount from 84 million to closer to maybe 150 million or greater, since we pay in already an estimated 300 million. So for RTP projects, each state actually administers their own RTP funds, and it decides on the projects that they're going to finance. And each state must use 30% of their funds for motorized trail uses, another 30% for non-motorized trail uses, and then 40% for diverse mixed trails. That can be something that's used for snowmobiles in the winter and side-by-sides in the summer, or it could be something that is used for snowmobiles in the winter and horseback riders in the summertime. 80% of the funds for each of those projects can come from the RTP, and more in some instances, particularly out west where you've got the high PILT states. 20% of it comes from matching, and that can be money, it can be in-kind contributions, it can be donated equipment, etc. And the RTP funds may be used for maintenance and restoration of existing trails, which is, I think, a big difference between that and LWCF. And it can be used for development and rehabilitation of trails and trailhead facilities, purchase of trail construction and maintenance equipment. It can also be used for construction of new trails. So as you're dealing with folks in your district who are looking to get out and recreate more, and they're looking to find ways to fund their recreation, please look to the RTP, and we hope that you'll support the RTP. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I've listed 3 websites here that are very helpful for you to visit to learn more about the Recreational Trails Program. The first one is the Coalition for Recreational Trails, which is where you can search projects funded in your state. Every single state, there's an interactive map on there. You can go on there, click on your state, see which projects have been funded in your state. Very helpful site. Second one is the FHWA website, which provides you with the details and expenses and requirements for each of the RTP program details. And then the Americans for Responsible Recreational Access, or ARA, has additional information and a quiz on there about information for how you, what the uses are for the RTP funds. So we hope that you'll support RTP in next year's transportation reauthorization bill and support more money going to our power sports industry, as well as the non-motorized side of things for trail maintenance and development next year. Thanks much.
Thanks so much, Scott. And RTP is such a great example of the motorized, non-motorized, horseback, just the entire industry coming together around what's needed for trails. And as more people are out there every day, which is certainly something we want to continue to see, we definitely need these resources to funnel to the right place. And so please reach out to Scott or any of the panelists to find out more about how you can support this really important program. We're changing it up a bit really to talk about, oh, sorry, I thought we were going into REI, but we're going to Jennifer, Senior Director of Outdoor Outreach and Education at the Archery Trade Association. And archery is another place we've seen a great uptick in consumer interests, and certainly another place that benefits conservation when people are getting out there and hunting and doing these great outdoor activities. So with that, I will pass it on to Jennifer.
Thanks, Jess. Just a little insight into the Archery Trade Association. The ATA exists to inspire growth, increase participation, and preserve the sports of archery and bow hunting. We are best known for our annual trade show, which is the industry's largest archery and bow hunting show. But unfortunately, due to the current pandemic, we recently made the decision, and it was a difficult one just a couple weeks ago, to cancel our in-person event this January. Next slide, please. But we are much more than a trade show. My team's focus is on recruitment and retention, and we work with state agencies, NGOs, and industry to make that happen. While there is a lot of information on bow hunters in the U.S., there's little to nothing regarding archery participation as a whole. As a trade association, it is important that we are able to provide that information to the industry and our members, as well as use this information to understand where to focus our efforts. So we hired a research firm to provide us with a benchmark that we can then repeat and spot trends in the years moving forward. Next slide, please. Our study looked at participation in a 1-year and a 3-year period. This slide shows participation in 2019 only. It is important to note that this is how people self-identified, which is a key factor between recruitment and retention. Typically, when someone self-identifies as a bow hunter, for example, then they have moved from recruitment into retention. Next slide, please. We compiled a wealth of demographic data, including household income, education, gender, age, and ethnicity. Here is where trends will be extremely helpful moving forward. Anecdotally, we've been hearing that license sales and harvest numbers have increased incredibly since the pandemic began, with many states having record years. The Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports is compiling this data. We should have a better picture regarding hunting participation in a few months. Next slide, please. In December 2019, we saw the passing of the Pittman-Robertson Modernization Act. This act expands the use of existing PR funds generated from an 11% excise tax that is levied on all archery and bow hunting equipment and increases the agency's authority to manage programs in their state. Provisions of this bill increase agencies' flexibility by permitting promotion and extended outreach to more effectively engage new hunters. The grant that you see here on leveraging influencers and content marketing to recruit bow hunters would never have been possible before this act was passed. Next slide, please. In addition, the ATA with partners were awarded 4 more grants. With USA Archery, we will be conducting a study of current tournament participants to gauge their participation in bow hunting and which R3 messaging resonates best with that audience. With the American Sport Fishing Association and other partners, the real-time data dashboard will develop direct links to state licensed databases using established and secure data transfer protocols to instantly and regularly compile licensed sales data, allowing state agencies and the R3 community to quickly respond when current events impact participation, such as COVID-19. Next, assessing hunter avidity will allow states to better measure the complete picture of hunting participation in much greater detail. By having a measure of avidity associated with each licensed hunter, states will be able to strategically target hunters with messages tailored to their individual stage of the hunting experience. To accomplish this, the U.S. Sportsmen's Alliance, ATA, and Responsive Management will research and design a hunter affinity model. And our work with Kentucky, the Association of Conservation Information, and the National Shooting Sports Foundation will address the growing interest, especially among the critically important millennial generation, in sourcing local sustainable protein. This group is collectively known as locavores. The typical locavore is very different from traditional hunting participants, as most state agencies are not properly prepared or equipped to attract them to their programs, teach them how to hunt, and support their continued involvement. This grant will provide the right tools to effectively recruit this potential source of new participants. Next slide, please. While our main source of revenue is our trade show, the ATA has managed to pivot and still support our mission and vision statements through new projects like our conservation initiative, virtual education for our members, virtual stakeholder meetings for state agencies, and our ability to work with partners and apply grant funding to promote and grow our sport. We are grateful to those of you in Congress that supported the PR Modernization Act that allows us to use FET dollars creatively to fund these important efforts. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Another way that more people getting outside is helpful to our public lands and waters and wildlife habitat. So thank you. Now I'm passing on to Teldy Harrison. Teldy has been running the Recreate Responsible campaign, which she'll tell you a little bit more about, which has been such an important effort going on in this community, especially with more people getting outdoors and more new users. And so how do we encourage people to continue to get outside while also welcoming them? So thank you, Teldy, for your leadership on this, and then also for your day job as Government and Community Affairs Manager for REI.
Thanks, Jess. As Jess mentioned, I lead REI's federal government affairs. And as you may know, REI is a specialty outdoor retailer and the nation's largest consumer co-op. We have 167 stores in 39 states and DC and more than 19 million members. Slide. So the Recreate Responsibly campaign kicked off in April this year. At that time, our public lands were starting to reopen in Washington and across the nation, We were all super excited for folks to get back outside, but concerned about the guidance being inconsistent across boundaries and geographies, causing confusion. There had been significant confusion and overuse of certain areas when our public lands were closing earlier in the spring. And so we hoped that through collaboration, we could help ensure users return to our public lands prepared to recreate responsibly, to help keep themselves and others safe, and to take some of the burden off of our public land managers to help ensure that those public lands could stay open. Slide. As the nation continues to social distance, we know that spending time outside in parks and green space can provide a much needed respite during this challenging time. And the numbers show Americans are turning to our public lands and green spaces more than ever, as you've heard today. However, everyone from the family heading to a local park for the first time to the outdoor enthusiast doing an epic weekend hike can use a little guidance right now on how to take care of themselves and others and keep our public lands open. Slide. So in mid-April, we brought together a national group of around 20 partners from state and federal agencies to businesses and the NGO community to discuss the value of having shared guidance at the national level that was consistent across boundaries and geographies and easy to share. In a short time frame, the group crafted shared guidance by building on the CDC guidance and working collaboratively with diverse user groups and agency staff to craft the most meaningful yet shareable guidance for outdoor recreation users. We launched the campaign heading into Memorial Day weekend with great success. We had more than 11 million impressions on social media, and 250 organizations joined the coalition in the first 24 hours. As you can see, the coalition now has over 750 organizations nationwide. In addition to the shared guidance, the coalition had weekly calls, which are now occurring monthly, to aid in collective problem solving and information sharing across agencies, states, businesses, and NGOs. And it truly has been of great value. We've had the opportunity to include a number of the federal agencies, including the National Park Service, Forest Service, Rec.gov, NOAA, and others on the weekly calls, and having them share the issues that the agencies are facing around the country, as well as what guidance or targeted outreach to the user groups would be the most useful for them, has been a great collaboration and a wonderful way for the outdoor community to support our federal land management agencies. And this work has really highlighted how important it is to fully fund our land agencies and to continue to support their staff who are managing record-setting visitation, enforcing social distancing and managing the need for PPE while addressing new user issues and juggling their regular work. Slide. Additionally, in mid-April, the Washington State started a Washington Coalition by convening a diverse group of stakeholders. And within weeks, the group had grown from 20 to over 100 organizations representing motorized, non-motorized, more urban focused, the hunting and fishing community, climbing, hiking, and more, all joining a weekly 8 a.m. call. And the calls were extremely important for county, state, and federal land management agencies to stay coordinated on their rolling openings and also be able to provide an update on what was happening on their public lands one time to the entire user group community of Washington. This then allowed the user groups to use their social platforms to get the message out and educate their followers and their communities. So folks were getting out responsibly. With the success of the Washington Coalition and hearing the value to agency staff and recreation users, we've now helped to establish additional state coalitions, as you can see. And just wanted to share a couple highlights from some of their work. In Colorado, Governor Polis established the week before Labor Day as Recreate Responsibly Week this year. Governor Whitmer in Michigan did a great video on her social media channels heading into the 4th of July. And in Washington State, they've put up more than 600 signs at all of the state-owned recreation sites. Slide. So what is the guidelines? So as you guys can see here on the left is kind of the longer form of our 7 guidelines for recreating responsibly. On the top right, we have more of a short form with images and titles. And we also have some individual tiles for Instagram stories. And we've translated the guidelines into 7 languages plus ASL to help make sure it's accessible to the largest audience possible. And we have free downloadable unbranded toolkits on the website. And they've been super helpful in providing organizations with assets to educate their audiences and share the guidelines more widely. The website also has a blog and a robust resource hub that digs deeper into what it means to recreate responsibly based on activity, state, and more. Slide. So lastly, I want to share a bit about the success of the campaign. I think it's a true testament to the value of the guidance as well as how the outdoor community has received it. Within the time frame between Memorial Day and Labor Day, we've organically generated more than 432 million impressions with more than 52,000 posts. And you can see some of the numbers on the toolkit downloads. We have about 10,000 downloads at this point, and some great visitation to the website. Just to give you context, a regular nonprofit might see about 15,000 visits per month. So just seeing some great traffic and folks utilizing these resources. Slide. And although we've seen great success with this campaign, there's so much more to do. As you've heard today, we're seeing a great increase in outdoor users. And with that increase comes an opportunity to help educate and ensure these new recreationists become responsible users of our public lands. So I hope you'll take a minute to learn a little bit more about the campaign, and we'd love for you and your boss to share the guidelines with your constituents, and of course, fully fund our federal land management agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Keldy, and thanks for putting that great network together and awesome visuals that we've seen some of the agencies using and certainly many industry partners and the public using across the board. I'd love to pass it on to Chris Steinkamp, the Director of Government Affairs and Climate for Snow Sports Industries America. And just as a reminder, we have 2 brief presentations left. We should be wrapping up in the next 5 or 10 minutes. And then we'd love to take your questions. So if you are putting them in the question box, we'll try to answer as many as we can in the 15 minutes we have left. And then we'll definitely connect with this presentation and other information over email. Thanks. Chris?
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for having me here today, and thank you all for joining us. I'll be quick about this. Just building on what Tali just said, that people are excited to get out this winter. It's supposed to snow this weekend, so we're really super excited about the upcoming winter season. Snow Sports Industries America is the national trade association for the $72 billion winter outdoor sports industry. And that includes manufacturers of winter outdoor gear and retailers. So next slide. So just rewind a few months back to March 2020. The ski resorts closed almost immediately, and that led to an industry-wide shutdown, which ended an incredibly good winter season just immediately. Inventories were left unsold, and retailers were left pretty much having to go have to close their stores. The ski resorts lost $2 billion in unrealized income last spring. Retail sales were down about 40% in March, which led to layoffs and closures. And the stimulus package helped many retailers and manufacturers at that point, but it has since run out. A lot of our retailers and manufacturers quickly shifted to online selling and had to re-educate their staff to new consumer buying habits and basically try to figure out a new way of selling to their consumers almost overnight. Winter recreation shifted to the backcountry, which saw an increased sales of backcountry gear in March and April. So that was something that surprised us all. While a lot of us weren't skiing at the resorts, a lot of people went into the backcountry, and gear sales were really spiked. Unfortunately, at that time, though, a lot of retailers canceled their fall orders because they had so much inventory left over from the spring. And our national trade show this January has been canceled and replaced with a digital show just because of the uncertainty with COVID that might be lingering into the spring. Next spring, or next slide, please. So it's been a really tough, on the winter outdoor community. The sudden shutdown in mid-March came at a traditionally high sales season for the retailers, but it also, when the resorts close down, it impacts our ski communities as well. Places like Stowe and Aspen and Vail and Mammoth Lakes. So it impacted food and beverage, hotels, retailers. So when the resorts closed down and the ski industry closed down, the communities felt the burden as well. But there have been a lot of bright spots as well. Businesses that faced the challenges head on, they quickly pivoted and found new ways to adapt and innovate in ways that will ultimately make their businesses stronger for the future. And they moved to new ways of selling and to match new consumer buying habits. Online pickup or online selling and pickup in store, touchless pay, limited capacity. And how do we really kind of adapt this new COVID social distancing through in-store flow mapping and implementing new technologies? So it really, the retailers really had to quickly pivot, but I think it's going to help them in the long run. But the manufacturers had to pivot as well. Their communications with their sales team had to take place virtually. And a lot of them did really, really well in how they did that this spring. So there's been a lot of good that came out of this in terms of finding out new ways to do business and meet consumer buying habits. But also the winter outdoor industry has spent the entire summer preparing for this new normal that is going to happen this winter. A lot of the retailers and resorts were open this summer, and we're really trying new things to adapt to what could be a busy winter season, we hope. Next slide, please. So we published some consumer research about a month ago, and just the key takeaways were that consumer demand is very high. People want to get outside, and I think that's something that we've learned hearing from the different industries this morning, that people do want to get outside. It's a way for everyone to socially distance and kind of relieve a lot of the anxiety that COVID has brought on. But even so, many expect reductions in income, obviously, in spending and savings. And travel in particular is going to be dramatically reduced this season, which could impact the ski industry as well. Obviously, in-person spending is going to be different, and it's going to be driven online. But overall, we found out that core participants are very excited about the upcoming season, and there's going to be a continued strong desire to get outside. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? Well, the resorts are going to open, and everyone's really excited for this. They've spent a lot of time this summer putting their plans in place, and I think all the resorts have a really sensible and thoughtful plan to get people on the hill. So season pass sales so far are really strong, the Epic and Icon Pass and the Indy Pass. The reservations, resorts are going to require skiers to make reservations, and they're going to put priorities in place for pass holders, which is a little bit different this year. The limited amenities in the at the rental shops and at the lodges are going to be a little bit different, and then travel obviously is going to be declining. So we don't see a lot of people flying from New York and Boston to Colorado and Utah. I guess time will tell, but that's what we think right now. So skiing is going to be a little bit different, but I think everyone's excited about it, and resorts have put really good plans in place to move people through. But the thing that we found that is really surprising, building on what we saw last year, is that backcountry and Nordic gear are really, really strong. People are going to get out. They're also going to get out in the backcountry. So stores are already sold through on much of this year's backcountry gear and Nordic inventory. But that has also led in a little bit of concern that the backcountry is going to be crowded with people who aren't trained on avalanche safety, which is going to put a strain on local first responders. So we've got to address that as well, and I know people are. Next slide, please. So just in wrapping up, the outlook on winter is going to be good. It's going to be a little bit different. People are going to be trying new activities the next year. And we found through our research that the most anticipated increases we're seeing for some off-resort activities, such as Nordic skiing, backcountry skiing, like we have just said, snowshoeing, fat tire bicycling, uphill skiing, sledding, and winter running. Those are, consumers are looking for different ways to get outside this winter, and we're going to see a spike in some of those gear sales, we hope. Obviously we're just getting into our season now, so we don't have data on gear sales for the winter, But we should have that data soon, and we look forward to staying in touch with you. But just to talk about what we're always concerned about is climate change. It's always a consideration with us. So on top of the anxiety and the changes that COVID has brought on, climate change is always a consideration for our industry. And there's always a trepidation about what this winter will bring. So it's a driver of our industry's success every year. We're dependent on consistent winters. And when that doesn't happen, our industry suffers. So we look forward to working with all of you on helping to drive sensible and bipartisan climate policy in the very near future. The second thing that is continuing to add a little bit of a burden to our industry are the tariffs. Our retailers and our manufacturers are having to deal with increased tariffs in the form of an added tax, which has limited their ability to stay afloat during the short selling season that we have. And we are working really hard to help alleviate the burdens of the tariffs, which are being placed on our retailers and our manufacturers, and are ultimately going to be placed down to the consumers. So climate change and tariffs are always a concern with us, on top of everything that else is going on with COVID. So that's a quick wrap up for what we're looking at, but we look forward to staying in touch, and thank you all for joining us today.
Chris, thanks so much. And thanks for bringing up the tariffs. Obviously, that was something that was affecting the industry across the board prior to COVID, but certainly hasn't been helpful as we still have industries struggling to come back. And, love to see a positive outlook for the winter season. And hopefully Ed, who will pass on our last speaker, can speak for just a few minutes on his business, which is the International Snowmobiling Manufacturing Association. He's the president. So another important part of the winter outdoor recreation economy. And Ed, we're going to leave it to you to close us out so we can get to a couple key questions.
Okay, then I got to move along, don't I, Jess? Well, in March of 2020, the snowmobile season ended with COVID and the lockdown. Cut our snowmobile sales off, at the knees. And we had a great year going last year. It was stopped short. So it's been a couple long months for us to get ready and get over that. But you know what? We're really excited now. Because guess what? The weather forecast is perfect. The upcoming winter is going to be a snowy, cold winter. For those of you who don't like winter, oh well. The northern part of the US and where we ride snowmobiles is going to be perfect. And for those of you that are interested, there are 6 to 9 inches of fresh snow on the ground in the UP of Michigan right now. So we're looking now for the sales of the 2021 models. Guess what? We're already up 10% from last year. The 4 snowmobile manufacturers went into a serious production a few months ago. They're caught up and we're delivering snowmobiles in the marketplace every single day. We expect thousands of outdoor enthusiasts to join the more than 3 million snowmobilers in the United States. And our customers are, believe me, they're tuning up their snowmobiles and polishing them as we speak, because I visited my neighbor yesterday. The majority of snowmobilers are members of more than 2,000 snowmobile clubs, which are active year round. These clubs serve as social clubs, but mostly they're designed to build and maintain trails. Snowmobilers pay to ride and enjoy the trail system and the riding areas in a responsible way. Snowmobilers across the country purchase annual licenses and trail permits, which pays for the trail maintenance, signs, and development. We also support the RTP funds that were spoken so fluently by Scott from the MIC. We are partners in supporting the RTP, and it is a great asset to the outdoor recreation community. The club members, those members of the 2,000 clubs, they work very closely with our public land managers in the U.S. Forest Service and state forests. We work with people in the U.S. Forest Service year round, winter, summer, spring, fall, because we're always preparing the trails and getting them ready for the winter, which happily is almost here. Collectively, we have built a 136,000 mile trail system. 136,000 miles stretches from northern Maine to to the great state of Washington. We snowmobile in 24 states. The average age of a snowmobiler is 44 and starting to get younger, thank God. Younger enthusiasts are entering the community, and guess what? More females are entering the community as well. They're buying more snowmobiles because, quite honestly, we're making them more comfortable, more reliable, and the motels and restaurants that service us when we're snowmobiling are getting better, and they all have nicer whirlpools because we like to whirlpool after we snowmobile. In the states where we do snowmobile is the economic engine that fuels the economy. We generate 32 billion with a B in economic activity each year across the United States. Looking ahead, early sales of riding and trail permits are up. The money that is used to buy the permits is used to maintain and build trails. We maintain, we pay for our trails. We love the support of the RTP fund. We snowmobile and we support rural America across the states. So snowmobilers also practice social distancing, and we have for years. We wear PPE heavy clothing, gloves, and balaclavas. If you haven't heard of a balaclava, it's kind of like the best mask you can buy, which covers your head, your nose, your mouth, and keeps you warm and keeps you safe. We enjoy our outdoor sport when it's cold and snowing, and we cheer when it snows. So there's a lot of us, and some people think we're strange, but we love it. And if you want to find out more about the snowmobile business, visit our website, snowmobile.org. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, everyone, all the panelists. There's so many amazing people in this industry, and we hope to highlight even more of our great recreation economy and activities that make up the industry. But I'm glad you got to hear from, a good diverse array of industry activities. We have awesome questions coming through. I'm going to try to get to 2 or 3, so let's maybe keep the answers a little short, and then the rest hopefully we can answer over chat or over email. But given the overview of all of these industries, what is the overall prediction to the industry as a whole for the remainder of the battle with COVID-19? How will the job market be affected in all the industries, do you think? So I'd love to pass that on to Nicole, Scott, Chris, anyone who wants to take on how the job market will be affected and really what the prediction is for the rest of COVID-19, because I think that's important.
Yeah, Jess, I'll go ahead and kick it off. For the boating industry, we're expecting sales year over year to be about at that 10% mark, which is great news. As I shared, if you're a boat manufacturer, you're looking to hire. So it's a great industry all the way from engineers to manufacturing to marketing folks. There are a lot of jobs that are open in this industry. And quite frankly, they can't build the boats fast enough. But there's a lot of uncertainty that remains. A lot of the sales that we saw this past summer were generated from boat shows and events that happened in the early winter. And we're not likely to see many of those happen this winter just due to the restrictions on large public gatherings. So while people are optimistic, it's really going to depend on how long this lasts, the restrictions that are going to continue to happen at the state and local government to keep people safe, and how we're going to be able to continue to generate business in a time of uncertainty, particularly in Q1 of 2021.
Yeah, Jess, I would add to that, for us in the motorcycle, ATV, and side-by-side industry, most of our vehicles are 4-season vehicles. Some are not. Despite the fact that I put that picture up of my nephew Colby ice racing on his motorcycle. There's not a lot of people who ride their motorcycles in the wintertime in those kind of conditions. They switch over to Ed's snowmobiles instead. But I will say that I think part of the stimulus spike that we got from the stimulus has kind of washed out and flattened a little bit. So a lot of folks were willing to go out and make those purchases during the stimulus timeframe. As COVID continues, depending on how long it takes for a vaccine and for therapeutics, you may see, we're already seeing states starting to clamp down again. You'll see recreational facilities shutting down again for our vehicles, and that will have an impact as well. So it's a little bit of a wild card to see how badly the COVID-19 treats us this winter time. And then as that gets into the spring of next year, certainly record sales are not sustainable forever. And we realize that. And so the other wild card that we have is just disruptions in supply chains. And you know, internationally, you're already seeing states or countries shutting down and clamping down significantly as a result of spikes that they're seeing. Many of those countries have supply chain suppliers to our industry. And so that's one other wild card as to what may impact our sales next year.
Hey, Jess, this is Ed. As long as it keeps snowing this winter, snowmobiles, we're going to do great.
Thanks, Ed. And I think as I had trouble finding a bike rack and other people had trouble finding a tent or a bike, that the distribution problems are going to continue. And so I think that's something to think about, that with these record sales also comes some problems when we run out of product, when we run out of parts that make the product. Even if we're making them in America, a lot of parts come from overseas, and we want to be able to keep up with that demand, but that's really hard under the new COVID restrictions. You know, business costs more. It costs more to do business, to do it safely, and we're all following those strict standards, but less product and probably lag times and product is certainly an outcome of that. Just a quick example of something that happened during the shutdowns that could happen potentially again, when small retailers and service providers across the industry were closed and big box like Amazon and Walmart and Target continued to sell product, we missed a lot of that sales revenue. And so we had some specialty retailers sitting in a Walmart parking lot, watching people walk out with a tent and hiking boots and fishing equipment, when really that could have been something benefiting a small local store, a Main Street store. So I think there's also some things to think about with, continued stimulus, with PPP, and just an effort to continue to create equity amongst the small businesses who have to shut down and, the big businesses that might sell similar products. So we want to be aware of that. One other great question. Can you talk more about the increases in diversity, race, gender, age during the pandemic? What are your expectations for the continued growth and use after the pandemic? And what are malls and casinos and other indoor attractions opening up again going to have an impact on that? I think this is a great question to end on. It's something the industry has been focusing on for so many years, and it's been really amazing to see those numbers change and to see more people get outdoors. I can quickly answer. I think Great American Outdoors Act is one of the first ways that we can actually increase access close to home. When governors said, stay close to home, but get outside for health and get outside for wellness, a lot of people looked around their community and said, I don't have that opportunity. I don't have a fishing, area near me. I don't have a bike trail. I don't have a pathway that's safe and gets me to a green space. So I think your investments, Congress investments in LWCF certainly help with that. But I'd love to hear, some final thoughts from the panelists about the increases in diversity that we've seen and how, we expect to continue to engage all communities when other attractions open up, and certainly international travel, which has always been, something that is somewhat competitive to staying in the States and recreating.
Hi, Jess. I'll just share a couple things. I agree with everything that you had shared. The market research that NIC performed on millennials and Generation Z focused a lot more on age and gender. And what we found was they do want to stay closer to home. They want to do day trips, 48% more on day trips. And the least costly outdoor recreation experiences are what are keeping these young adults engaged. We also found that men tended to break higher in going out and doing recreation activities. And so we think keeping this age category involved for future, it really tends to be around providing them the tools, giving them the know-how so that they have a comfort level to continue to want to experience and enjoy the outdoors.
Hey, Jess, this is Karen. I'll jump in. In the RV industry, through our marketing campaign to consumers, that is one of the things we've been focusing on for about the last 8 years, is bringing that diversity, because what we know is that in order to get people to try these activities, they've got to see themselves in what is being portrayed in all of the marketing and promotional that goes out to consumers. So we've worked with a lot of influencers and worked in communities where we're trying to reach some of those audiences that were less represented in those outdoor spaces, and encouraging partnerships with them so that when we've got consumers across the country looking at what they're going to do, they see themselves in those activities and have that welcome feeling of wanting to be part of those groups. So it is definitely something we focused on, and we've been seeing those increases. We've, dropped our average age of RV owners, and we've also made inroads into having that diversity amongst our owners as well.
Thank you. And we are a little over time. There's so many good questions and there's so much good information on this panel. So we will follow up over email. We appreciate everyone's time, spending an hour and 15 minutes with us today. Excited to get this recording out and continue this conversation, and have Chris and Ed back to tell us about what the winter looked like, to talk about the summer and spring months, and really how we're going to harness this energy that we've seen when things do open back up and when the world does look a little bit more like it did a year ago, and we didn't see these participation numbers. I think between now and then, we'd love to see Congress pass a recreation package that includes key recreation legislation like Recreation on Red Tape, the SOAR Act, RTP, and many other bills that really are relief for the industry. This is an industry that, as Senator Heinrich opened with, hasn't had a ton of attention. We're still kind of a new industry. And just like any other industry, we need certainty so that we can really continue to grow economies, put Americans to work, and just make sure everyone has a great, safe place to enjoy the outdoors, recover from the past 7 months of isolation, and get back outside. So thank you so much, everyone, and really enjoy catching up with you sometime in the near future. And thanks to SORP, Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals, who helped us host this with their platform, another wonderful resource if you have questions, especially around government agency workforce and what they've been going through these past couple months. So thank you, SORP, and thanks to all the panelists.